number 6. And the reason, another purpose of fasting is for real right. Now, I want us to remember as well in Second Chronicles, and we look at this, Second Chronicles chapter number 7 and verse number 40, right? So we're looking at another reason as real revival, or real renewal, a real awakening, right? Real revival, real renewal, or real awakening, another purpose. And you want to look at the text in the book of Second Chronicles chapter number 7 and verse number 14. Second Chronicles chapter number 7 and verse number 14. Now the thing is, you won't see the word fasting mentioned in this text. Second Chronicles chapter 7 and verse number 14. But if we read it, and I know that this is a passage that a lot of us would already know, Second Chronicles chapter number 7 and verse number 14. And it says that if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sins, he says, and I will heal their land. You know, sometimes you read this verse and we overlook this phrase, humble themselves. You know, we take it for granted, or really, we don't really give it much thought. But if you are humbling yourselves, like God would expect us to humble ourselves, then that includes the act of fasting. In the book of Psalms 35 and verse number 13, and we would have seen this before, Psalms 35 and verse number 13. David is speaking here and he says, but as for me, when they were sick, he says, my clothing was sackcloth. He says, and I humbled myself. And notice that he humbled himself, he says, with fasting. And he says, and my prayer returned into mine own bosom. So notice that he humbled himself, and he humbled himself by fasting. And that's why in Second Chronicles 7 and verse 14, when you see this term, shall humble themselves and pray. Again, we can humble ourselves before God through the act of fasting. When a person is sick, they need healing, right? When a nation is sick, they need healing. But we need to remember who is the healer. God is the healer. So, David, why are you humbling yourself? Second Chronicles 7 and verse 14. He says, I'm humbling myself, he says, with fasting. What comes with humbling? Fasting. What is the catalyst, as some people say, for humbling yourself? Fasting. There's no humility without fasting. Humbling the soul comes with fasting. And David tells us that in Psalms 35 and verse 13. So if we go back to the text in 2 Chronicles 7, how are they humbling themselves? Well, they are humbling themselves through prayer and fasting. He says, once they do that, then, he says, when you do this fast and pray, he says that God says that he will do what? That he will hear from heaven. He will forgive their sins. And he says that he will heal their land. So another purpose of fasting is really for real revival, real renewal, real awakening. how does that revival, or how does that change? How does healing, or how does that renewal take place? Through when we fast and pray and we seek God's face. God's part is that He will hear, He will forgive, and He will heal. So if we're looking for real revival, real renewal, or real awakening, another way that we can do that, one other purpose, is through the act of fasting and praying. Another reason that we can see for fasting and praying